This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Welcome to the From Pain to Purpose radio show. I'm your host, Eva Fulton. In this show, we explore the incredible journeys of resilience, healing, and transformation. In each episode, we will sit down with individuals who have faced unimaginable struggles and turned their pain into power, heartbreak into hope, and their challenges into meaningful change and finding new purpose in life. Through candid conversations and inspiring stories, we will uncover how pain, whether emotional, physical, mental, or spiritual, can be the catalyst for profound growth and a deeper sense of purpose. So if you are looking for motivation, insight, and real stories of triumph over adversity, you're in the right place. Let's get started on this journey from pain to purpose. Let's give veterans a voice through Military Broadcast Talk. Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to Saturday, April 4th, year of our Lord, 2026. I am coming to you from my own studio this time, not on the road last week. Last week, guys, I was headed to an intense, more than I knew, Ultra Tracks event. And I think I almost bit off more than I could chew, but I actually survived it. I ended up hiking over 4.9 miles that day. It was, I've done the AT. I have done parts of the Camino. My intro video shows most of those pictures are all from the Camino de Santiago. That, by hands down, was so much easier than what I did last Sunday. But I survived, no injuries. Happy to report that. It was lots of scrambling over rocks. I was not prepared for that. And the elevation climb was definitely a beast. And I think in some ways that's where we have to learn where our limits are, which I think really in some ways is a good segue into my guest this week. So Paula is going to rejoin us, and I want to do a much better introduction this week than I did last week. So her husband was in the Army, served in the Army in the 90s, was a sniper. So she is a former military spouse and has, seen a lot of things of how she, as a practicing attorney, can help those of us who are either navigating the veteran space, the parental space. So here's the rest of the breakdown on her. She's an attorney, she's an author, she's a clinical mental health counselor, fierce advocate for children, and she's the author of a book called Tumbleweeds, and she is a wealth of information. And my daughter had given me permission to, even have some of the advocacy work that I did for my daughter. I would say really I helped supplement her voice a couple of years ago when she was going through some of her experiences in the health world. As young adults, that can be challenging. But then there's also plenty out there for us as veterans who are navigating our health space as well. And I'm definitely an advocate that two sets of ears hear better than one. So without further ado,
The interview of the week is brought to you by Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
hey, Paula.
Hi, Eva. I'm so glad to be here with Working Tech.
Yeah, I know, right? For both of us. It's okay. We work with it, right? We work with
That's
it.
exactly right.
Adapt and overcome. They taught us well in the military, and I imagine even you as a spouse learned how to live with that as well. Adapt and overcome. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. All right. So help fill in the spaces on what I didn't say about your bio that you want to, give people some background. How did you get started in this space?
Yeah, well, I think you did mostly a really good job. So, I went to law school straight after I graduated from college. My senior year of college was actually 9/11. And so, the economy kind of crashed, and it was tough to get a job if you were straight out of college. So, I wound up enrolling in law school. So, I went straight to law school from my 4 year degree. I graduated in 2005. I worked as an attorney for a while, and then I just realized that law school did not prepare me for so many of the mental health issues that I faced in clients as an attorney. So often the law is just mental health triage, and no one has ever in the history of time called a lawyer because they were having a good day. It's not a good
Right.
day. Yeah, it's not a good day when you're feeling like you need to call a lawyer for whatever reason. So I went back to graduate school at Lenore Ryan University, which is a small Lutheran college in Hickory, North Carolina, and I became a licensed clinical mental health therapist. So I am both. I own a law firm and a counseling practice. And so, in the course of that, I do involuntary commitment court in North Carolina in a county that has an active VA. So I deal with veterans that are suffering from mental illness or who have dementia, which I think is a different classification than your traditional mental illness. But I deal with veterans in that space all the time. And
That's
I
got to
also
be
write,
tough.
it is, but some of them do really great with appropriate treatment. And so there is hope. I have definitely seen people do a lot better than what we would have expected. And I also do estate planning. So I write healthcare power of attorneys and power of attorneys, and I do guardianships for incompetent folks.
So how did you get started writing your book? It's how did what was the
Yeah.
foundation of that?
So my
Tumbleweeds.
so my book is about my four kids. So there's a section of my book about each of my children and kind of how they came into existence. So my oldest child is 32. She is legally adopted by me and my husband. I was her attorney when she was a foster child, and when she aged out of foster care, she pretty much had nowhere to go. And so my husband and I took care of her. We love her very much. And so she is our legal daughter. And we are now grandparents because she actually has a 7 year old. And
Oh,
then I have three sons that are biologically mine. My oldest one was born with a complete bilateral cleft lip and palate. So we've had to do a lot of medical stuff with him. Then my middle son was a micro preemie. I had acute preeclampsia with him. So he only weighed 1 pound, 14 ounces at birth. By the way, that's another story in which my military husband is a real hero. My husband is now a certified registered nurse anesthetist, and I probably would have died if but for the fact that my husband realized what was happening to me when no one
wow.
else did. And then my third baby was, I mean, third time's the charm. Like, my third baby was full term, totally healthy. very low on drama. I think the universe knew that I was done and I couldn't take any more by the time I got to him. But it's basically a story of like everything that our family had to go through with all of our children who are all now wonderful and thriving and doing great. So I'm hoping that my book makes people who have special needs children or children who have had trauma or children who are having medical issues. I hope that it empowers them, but I also hope it gives them kind of a roadmap for what they need to do when they're facing problems with their kids.
No, I get it. 'Cause my daughter a couple of years ago started experiencing this issue with throwing up. And it was not an eating disorder. She couldn't keep water down. I mean, that's how bad it was. She lost 100 and I think 120 pounds in 1 year. It was an awful lot of weight. She lost basically a human, right? I mean, she
Yeah,
right, had the weight she could lose, but not that way.
right.
That would not have, she would have preferred a controlled diet, not the unexpected loss of not being able to eat and the spontaneous, um, you know, throwing up. It was hard to endure. I had to take her to the emergency room, and, the first diagnosis that she had was, "Oh, do you smoke pot?" "Yes." I mean, there are not too many teenagers don't these days. Um, that they said, "Well, smoking pot was causing that." But her counter effect was it actually helped her be able to eat and, keep the food down when she did smoke pot. So she tried it, experimenting and not smoking, but she had more problems than when she actually smoked. So long story short, she did go to college and down into Houston at the University of Houston, had more issues, had passed out at a retail store and had to get an emergency room visit there. I got on the road as fast as I could to help her and, ended up finally, with her having a different specialist appointment. She already went through one specialist, was getting nowhere fast, and then when I went down to Houston and was there in person with her at the doctor's appointment with her, helping ask the right questions, that's when we finally got the test. It's a gastric emptying test to see how much food was left in her stomach after 4 hours. And, that's when they diagnosed her with gastroparesis. She had 63% of the food still in her stomach after 4 hours. And, she just it just was fermenting. Food would ferment in her stomach because it wasn't passing through. The stomach just was not working like it was supposed to. And, ultimately, and there's different modalities, or I think that's the right word, where some people do a feeding tube, some people do, a bunch of injections or this or that, and the gastric doctor that she went to, who happens to do, like, gastric sleeve and the bypass, said he had just, did a reversal on the, tube and ended up doing the basically a bypass. So that's what Carrie had, was the bypass. Um, it's created some other issues, afterwards, but at least she doesn't have that issue. But the hard part was that it took my presence being there for the doctors to listen to her. Otherwise, they just would have kept kicking her down the road, with no resolution. So I say all of that to lead into a question, because I know that that's where you get into how do you help navigate both the legal side, the parental side of helping your child go through some of these things.
So I want to start. Eva, you just gave me so much material to work with. Um, it's so much. I want to start with let's talk about adult children because
Okay.
obviously there's different legal standards if you're dealing with minors versus if you're dealing with adult
Right.
children.
Right.
But the first thing that I think is really important is that you, as mom and dad, are fostering a good relationship with your adult children. Because if you don't have, like, there are so many adult children now who feel like they cannot go to mom and dad for whatever reason, or they won't be honest with mom and dad about something like, yes, I was smoking pot, because they don't want mom and dad to freak out. So I think it's a real testament to your motherhood that your daughter, number one, came to you at all, but number two, was very honest with you about what she was experiencing, because every child won't do that. You have to have that foundation with your kid, because that is your early, like, gateway to success, for lack of a better statement. So I kudos to you for all of that. And I just want to encourage other parents that, if your kid doesn't like you or feels like they can't be honest with you, they're not going to come to you. So
Right.
that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is that I see so many young people. It seems like the younger you are, the easier it is for you to get written off when something legitimate is going on, because doctors aren't used to seeing young people with major problems. They're
Yeah.
used to seeing that in folks over 50. So when you're young and you come in with a presenting issue, I think it's much easier for a doctor to miss it, because they think you don't have a risk factor. Like, we see this all the time in young women with ovarian cancer, where doctors just miss it, not because all the symptoms aren't there, but just because they think they're young and it won't happen to them.
Yeah.
So, um, I want to talk about the pot thing for a minute before we start talking about, like, healthcare advocacy, which is, I see this all the time. I have clients who come to see me for private therapy, and I've had people that have had everything from severe endometriosis to what they thought were heart palpitations and panic attacks to mental health issues. And when they went to the doctor, the regular doctor, the second they admitted to smoking pot, the doctor just pretty much shut it down. Like, well, you just
Yeah.
need to stop smoking pot. That's your problem.
That's what
And
the emergency room did, and I was like, "No, that's just that just didn't connect with me." I never accepted that diagnosis from the start.
right. And I think, well, obviously you were right to do that. And I'm not saying that smoking marijuana is good nor bad. I prefer to come at that with a judgment-free attitude, because
Mhm.
one of the things about marijuana is that we genuinely don't know what all it does. I mean, it's not exactly sexy to study marijuana. Like, certainly you shouldn't be using marijuana when you're pregnant, but the government doesn't really have, they've never really conducted a solid study, so we don't know what marijuana does or doesn't do for you. And
Yeah.
so it's difficult to know the answer. But usually if I have a young person come in who's had that experience, what I'll tell them to do is to stop smoking pot for 30 days and see if they get better. Like, just full on stop smoking weed for 30 days. And if you're better, great. But I've never met one who was better after 30
Yeah.
days of cessation.
Terry wasn't. Yeah, she wasn't.
The other thing that I'll add, every now and then I have somebody who says, I can't. I can't stop smoking it for 30 days. That is a whole other problem that's
Right.
unrelated to your medical problem, because you truly should be able to stop smoking anything or drinking for 30 days if you need to. And if you can't, that highlights an even bigger problem that is a whole other conversation. But
Right.
I do see doctors a lot who will write off somebody because of age, and if age and marijuana are both present, what your daughter experienced is unfortunate, but also very, very common. So I just want to say that for your listeners. I do see that a lot. And that is an area where, if something serious is going on, some of the time you do need mom, dad, or a really good friend to go with you. Because what I also see happen is, you don't feel good anyway. Again, like, no one's going to see a doctor or a specialist because they're doing great. You know, you go in there because you're not feeling good to begin with. And then if they dismiss you or write you off or say something and you get focused on that one thing, you forget your questions. You're not getting what you need answered. Or because you're not thinking because you're upset or triggered or something, nobody is there asking the right questions. So,
I started trying to go to the doctor with a list. Like, at the VA, I think I have twice a year appointments. I go in with my list. What are the the issues that have been on the table already? Just making sure we stay on top of that, and if there's any changes. But are there any new things that have popped up that I haven't covered and maybe I need a referral for?
Yeah, that's a solid strategic plan. And, your children and family members and loved ones all need that, because if you don't have your own list, or even if you do, it can get really easy to get off topic. The other thing is, if you feel like the doctor is just dismissing you and just saying something like, well, you're young, you're smoking weed, you need to stop. A lot of times for young people, or well, probably for anyone, not just young people, but that feels very dismissive, but it also feels
Yeah.
very judgmental. And so a lot of times people will shrink and they won't respond back. Or if they respond back and it's just them and the doctor, then sometimes that just leads to nowhere because the doctor assumes that they're right. So it can be very helpful to have a parent standing there saying something like, I understand what you're saying, and maybe my child does need to cessate the marijuana. However, marijuana is not while she's throwing up this much. This is new. This is serious. Like, is there some other test? Like, nobody should be vomiting like this.
You right?
Sometimes you need someone to redirect the conversation and get it back under control so that it can go in the direction it needs to go in.
The other thing that she did do was she gave me access on the labs and, reports that came in, so that when they actually came in and I was able to help read them too, I could help her understand, well, what exactly are we reading and what are the implications. So I could help her navigate towards some diet supplement stuff that her nutritionist wasn't giving her, but just what I've learned in my own course of life. And I study supplements and vitamins and stuff because I've had my own issues, but helping her, especially like getting enough protein. And now she's having some diabetic issues that she's been having to navigate towards too. But that's the hard barrier that she's even had with that, is getting them to be serious and listening to her and figuring out, is she really diabetic? Can she get the prescription to get the tester? And she had to buy one at Walmart off the shelf to get it started before the doctor would submit it in for the insurance to be able to get the approval on it. It's just been a very tough process, and still, plenty of questions. That's, from that clinical side, how do you help balance that as well? Because it's not just a legal side, it's very clinical side.
Yeah, so again, Eva, you're just great because you keep giving me all this stuff to work with. Um, one of the other things I was going to say is that insurance is a nightmare when you are an experienced adult who understands what's going on here. It is really bad when you're a young person or an extremely old person and you've never had to navigate that before. So, insurance is a whole other area because people get frustrated and they give up, which sometimes I think is what these companies want us to do.
Yeah.
But if you really stick with it, you kind of got to be like a dog to a bone with stuff like that. But that stuff is also exhausting and not something that you're going to be able to do well if you feel like crap, which is why sometimes you need some help. So I wanted to talk for a minute also about the three different ways that somebody can get authorization to help because they're not the
Okay.
same and they have different legal values.
Okay.
So the first one is exactly what you said Carrie gave you, which was just basic access. Mom can log in, she can see my files, she can talk to the doctor, doctor can talk to my mom. That's great. That's wonderful. A higher level of that is a healthcare power of attorney. So I really like for young adults and college kids to have healthcare power of attorneys. That's not something that just needs to be for old people. Like if you're over 18, you need a healthcare POA, and I'm going to tell you why. If you get into a major car wreck, if you've had a traumatic brain injury, if you're in the hospital, if you get diagnosed with some sort of fast acting cancer and need cancer treatments, if you have something that's truly serious going on, mom can't just help you with just access. Mom has to have a legal right to grant that access, which is
Right.
why a healthcare power of attorney is much better. Most of the time, you can get a healthcare POA. I mean, I hate telling people to download legal documents off the internet, but if money is an issue as a worst case scenario, you can do it that way. You can also get them, a lot of times, hospital chaplains will give them to you. Obviously, the VA hospital will give them to you, but a healthcare POA is not something you necessarily have to see an attorney for, but most lawyers can give you one. But they're very, very important. And I really do like young people to have them just in case. They're not here for mom and dad to abuse it, but they are here in the event of an emergency.
Right. Right.
And if you don't want to give one to mom and dad, give it to someone else who you trust. Like, think to yourself, if I just got hit by a bus, but I'm not dead, who needs to make those medical choices?
Well, and that's very, very important. So my second ex-husband originally gave his medical power of attorney to his mother. Well, things changed at the very end, and he ended up giving that medical power of attorney to me as his ex-wife, the mother of his children. I had a very tough decision to make. So just know that you don't want that medical power of attorney and take it lightly, because sometimes there are some very serious aspects of that as well. And, when you have to make that kind of choice, because further care of life is not possible. He was dying from a stage 4 liver disease. So, it was very tough, and I don't take having that kind of power of attorney lightly.
Not at all. And
Yeah.
then I also wanted to touch on the third tier, which some states call this legal guardianship, other states call it a conservatorship, but they basically mean exactly the same thing. That is not something that an individual grants. That is the state government stepping in and saying, because of either a physical or mental impairment that is severe, this individual is no longer able to make their own medical decisions. And because they cannot, a guardian has to be appointed over them. Usually, that guardian is a family member, but if there's not a family member or not a suitable family member or not someone who wants it, it can be a paid corporate guardian or it can be your state's Department of Human Services. I have two examples of that. One is I've seen a case where a young woman got a traumatic brain injury and her mother did not have a healthcare power of attorney. So the only option that they had was to go to the court system, declare their daughter legally incompetent, then get guardianship, which enabled them to get the child admitted to a brain trauma unit.
Mhm.
That scenario was horrible because it made a bad situation exponentially worse, because you don't want to have health and mental, you don't want to have like physical health and the law intersecting with one another in an emergency medical situation. But that's exactly why having a healthcare POA is so important. The other thing that I've seen is I've actually seen a veteran who was a 100% disabled veteran, but was also schizophrenic and desperately needed a guardianship because his mental health had deteriorated so badly. And so he ultimately did get a guardianship and is doing much better now because he's on the medication he needs to be on. But sometimes it gets to that level. So if you have someone in your life who has advanced dementia, they don't remember who they are or where they are, they can't sign a power of attorney, some of the time that becomes the only option that you have. So just know that in an ideal world, just giving your support person a healthcare power of attorney is the ideal sweet spot because it's maximum authority without you actually having to go to court and have someone declared incompetent.
I can't imagine, that's the hard part, I think, when people are faced with, well, do I need to commit somebody? I and it gets very tricky. Are they gonna be a harm to themselves or to others? You don't wanna have to, that's a hard choice to make, that to take over someone's, I wanna say, liberty. It's not. right? Liberty's the right word, isn't
It
it?
is. It is that, and that's exactly what it is. And in all
Yeah.
honesty, it is and should be very difficult to do. I mean, you are taking away a person's decision making
Yeah.
authority in
That's
many
what our
cir-
very Constitution is founded on, is an individual's
it
liberty and right to pursue happiness.
it 100% is, but you also can't be so sick that you're pulling out your own teeth with pliers or you,
Cutting, yeah,
you can't be hurting yourself, and you also can't be hurting other people either.
right.
And so, some of the time, unfortunately, those are measures that just have to be taken. And they are, I feel like this happens, it's Tuesday, right? But like that's because of the work that I do. Like it genuinely is, as far as the population as a whole is concerned, it is genuinely very rare. But just as like a safety measure, like my intention when my sons turn 18 is to ask them to do a healthcare power of attorney so that if anything happens to them, again, not so I can abuse their,
Oh,
that
yeah.
authority, but so if they need help, I can be there to administer that help. And if they
But
don't want me,
you don't know what's gonna happen when it's gonna happen. They could be in a car wreck for all you
right,
know, and if you don't have that medical power of attorney, it's not because you're trying to take over their lives, it's how do you
right.
best help them?
Right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it is really important. And I hate this phrase, but I also think that unfortunately it's a true and accurate one. There are worse things than dying. I mean, there is a level of suffering that is actually worse than being deceased. And you have to plan for that because none of us are getting out of here alive, but none of us really know what that's going to
The
look like.
how. We don't know the
Right.
how.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. Like we don't want to wind up like, I hope I die when I'm 100 in my sleep, but we don't get to make those decisions.
right, right. Yeah, I've probably almost died more times than I can count. And it is tough. I had a medical event earlier this year and I was really, really sick. Had to have one of my sons drive me to the VA. It was, tough all night long, sitting there miserable, and I had a raging UTI,
Oh,
and as a result of that, I didn't know if I was facing stage 3 kidney failure. I mean, my
yeah.
labs were that bad for a while, and finally that resolved. I don't think I I don't think I'm still facing those issues, but that was kinda scary. One of my sons was willing to go to the doctor with me, and, he said, "Mom, I'm here to support you." He's 30, clear thinking, I can trust when because I'm not married, Dad's here in Maryland as well, but these were appointments that were gonna happen in Texas, and it's even hard as a single adult. How do you so this is not just the, "Hey, I'm here to take care of my dad," but I'm having to rely upon my kids helping me as a veteran because I'm gonna have health issues as well. I think for other women that single females, I'm sure it's the same for the guys as well. Counting on other family members is tough to do
Yeah.
because we've we're strong from the military, right? I'm invincible. I can do anything. I can fight war. Why can't I fight my health issues?
And most of y'all have. Most of y'all, in fact, have.
Yeah, but it feels very vulnerable to ask for help then. And then
Yeah.
I think that's where the true rubber meets the road on how do we help ourselves is asking for somebody to help us, to be
So
an advocate for us.
yeah, there is actually a meme on my social media this week that says asking for help is not a weakness. It is
Yeah.
actually a strength. And it is because everybody at some point is going to need help. And so I think what I would say to veterans is think about the number of times in the military where you asked for help. You know, you guys didn't fight wars alone. It's not like this was a one man show. You know, think about the times when you probably had to ask somebody to help you with your equipment or to hand you something. This is not different.
I'm laughing because, the only stupid question is the one you didn't ask. Right? So why would we think that asking for help in a medical or mental health situation is any different? Because it's not a
Ex-
stupid question.
It's not. And, you know, the other thing I'd like to add too, I think a lot of people feel like I don't want to burden my children. Okay. So
Yes.
I,
Or burden my spouse or a partner or anybody else. I don't wanna be a burden. I mean, I
correct, correct. So I was raised by that man, and he is 75. He is still alive. He is on fire. And one of the things that I've tried to say to him is, you are not burdening me. You raised me. I love you. Like, I want to take care of you. I want to make sure that you are fine. You know, now, I'm not trying to interfere with your life or take away your liberty, but you know, if you need somebody to go to the doctor with you, if you need somebody to sit in the hospital with you, I want to do that. I am happy to do that for you because I love you. And
right,
it is not a burden for me to do that. It is a pleasure. And it is also something that I have always assumed I would do. However, when parents are like, no, I don't want you involved, sometimes things then spiral out of control before adult children know there's a problem. And then something that could have been corrected much easier does become a nightmare and a disaster and a burden. And I almost look at it like this: if someone gave me a present, I'm not going to look at them and say, I don't want this present. I'm going to say, thank you, because I don't want to take that blessing away from them. And that's kind of the way I feel about my dad. Like, I want to be able to help my dad and look after my dad and take care of my dad. So if my dad shows up and is like, no, I don't want your help, that's taking that away from me. Not that it's
right.
about me, it's about him. But I say that to say, I think some of the time we think of ourselves as burdens when we're really not. And in fact, not asking for help is what creates the burden.
Well, I actually went through that with my second husband. He I even talk about it in my book. I swear, I think he left me because he loved me, because he thought he was gonna be the burden. Well, guess who ended up taking care of him anyways? But, it's I because I was the one that was there, it was still me. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess it didn't end up getting burdened with the medical bills, but I had the best insurance, and he could have probably had the liver transplant done if he had stuck with what was available. And, being knowing that I was the kind of person that, because I took my vows serious, for better
Yeah.
for worse, in sickness and in health, I took the vow seriously, but he didn't quite understand that kind of commitment. And maybe that's just, how he saw his parents. I mean, they were still married when they both died, but they were that nice, nasty kind of
Yeah.
relationship. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't ever understood the nice, nasty side of things, but um all right. So how do we I want to say frame this for people, for my brothers and sister? How do we frame this so that they see the benefits of why they are not a burden? Why I'm trying to, how do we change people's thinking so they don't get stuck on the negative side, and let's focus on the positive side.
I mean, I think it's a simple sentence: love is not burdensome. You
I
know,
love it.
people who love you do not view helping you, caring for you as a burden. You know, you just said when you were talking about your ex husband, you said, I really loved him.
Mhm.
So when you really love someone, it's not a burden for you to take care of them. That's exactly what I just said with my dad. Yeah, I really love my dad. It's not a burden for me to take care of him. I love my children very, very much. It is not a burden for me to take care of my children. Like my daughter sent me a text the other day. I think she'd asked me to borrow a little bit of money because their power bill was higher than it. Everyone's power bill was higher last winter. Everyone in the South, we had like 13 inches of snow in North Carolina, which we never get, but we had this insane snowstorm. So everybody's power was up like, a couple $100 a month more than they
Yeah.
had expected. And I sent her some money and she said something like, Mama, I'm sorry I'm a burden. I was like, you are not a burden. Like, you are my child. Like, if I
Right.
didn't have it to give you, I would have just told you I don't have it. But I
Yeah.
had it. I'm going to give it to you and help you out. Like, that's not a burden. Like, I love you. Right. So, love is not burdensome. And so, I think if you're feeling like a burden, think about the people that you love and just think about if because I assume that most normal functioning adults have at least one person that they love. If you don't have
Yeah.
at least one person you love, there's probably something wrong with you, but most of us have at least one adult that we love, even if it's just a friend. But think about that one person. If they came to you and said, I need help, what are you going to say? No? Like, of course you're not. You're going to do what you can do to be helpful.
Even if it's just listening. Just
Yes.
just letting somebody vent is I call it priceless, right? Just I don't need somebody to solve my problems for me. Sometimes just venting about it, even if it's a medical issue, venting about it, it helps reduce the cortisol level because you're lowering that stress response.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So how do we I know we've covered so many things. This I know we're gonna need to do a follow-up conversation, specifically, I think, about this guardianship issue that is popping up in the news, but we have a little bit of time. We can talk about, uh, the VA guardianship side of things. What's the original intent on why somebody I mean, because this is number 3 on, how do you how do you, I wanna say, prepare for that? Let's say, does number 2, having the power of attorney, lead into a potential guardianship if should you become incapacitated?
Usually, what the healthcare power of attorney does is it negates the need for the guardianship.
Okay,
So that then we don't have to do the guardianship because we have your healthcare power of attorney. So I see guardianships the most often in one of three scenarios. So let's take your stubborn individual who has, I shouldn't say stubborn, but like if this was my dad, I would use that analogy. Let's
yeah,
say it's your stubborn individual who they're not going to ask for help. They don't want to be a burden. They don't view this positively at all. They're just hell bent on, I'm not doing anything. Or they're hell bent on, I'm not going to spend any money on a healthcare power of attorney. I'm not going to need that. And now they're 85 years old and they have dementia. And their family members are now discovering that they have dementia because maybe for a while it just seemed like they were slipping a little bit, but now they realize how bad it really is. Some of the time that happens when somebody gets really dehydrated and winds up in the hospital or gets a urinary tract infection and winds up in the hospital. And then their kids realize how bad mom and dad are. Um, when we get to that point, if mom and dad still have capacity to sign a healthcare power of attorney, that's really important.
okay,
But sometimes we have people who are their that capacity is gone. Like they've waited too long and now they can't tell you who their children are because they don't remember. That is a person that needs to have a guardianship done. So
okay,
I see people like this who wind up in VA hospitals, and the VA hospital staff actually has to file a petition for guardianship in the county where the VA is located. And so then someone like me has to go visit them, review their medical records, affirm for the court that they don't remember anything and they are not going to be able to make a medical decision. Like if a doctor came in and said, we can try this pill or that pill, which pathway would you like to go? They're not going to understand what the person's talking about. So that's one pathway that I see a lot. Again, avoidable with a healthcare power of attorney.
Right.
Another one that I see is your veteran who got into a car wreck or had a brain aneurysm. So something went wrong with them that was unexpected and out of left field, because a brain aneurysm can happen to any of us. I mean,
Sure.
aneurysms happen to. I mean, I thank God every day that I don't have a brain aneurysm. I mean, that can happen to a healthy 35-year-old, a seemingly healthy 35-year-old. I mean, you could have it just hits you out of nowhere. But again, there's worse things than dying. So if you have an aneurysm, but it doesn't kill you, and you wind up in the hospital with a brain bleed having to get treatment, again, you're going to lack capacity to understand what's going on for the most part.
Right.
So at that point, there again, you're in a VA hospital with an emergency like that, then somebody's going to have to get guardianship over you if you don't have a healthcare power of attorney. So,
So,
and then my,
in some ways, a lot of that makes sense on that one, because when I went to the emergency room, that I was talking about earlier, the doctor said that they would have admitted me because I needed the strong IV antibiotics,
yeah.
but they didn't have enough beds. And
Oh,
so I'm just thinking, if they are so full of beds that they haven't been able to move them to some kind of a long-term facility or, nursing home or something where they could get palliative care or whatever that they needed, but they didn't have that guardianship over them to be able to make those choices. Well, that's
correct.
why they don't have the beds available, uh, because their hands are tied with the people that are occupying the beds.
It can be a contributing factor.
Yeah.
So I have definitely seen people sit in a hospital for 60 to 90 days because they didn't have guardianship. And
Yeah.
this is the other thing I also want to point out too. When you are selecting your healthcare power of attorney, that is your decision, right? Like I
Yeah.
have my healthcare power of attorney assigned because I know who I want making decisions for me if something happens to me. I also have a backup, right? Like what happens if me and my husband both get in a car wreck and he gets killed?
Right.
But I don't die, then I want to make sure I have someone that I trust
You have
in
an
the
alternative, yeah.
yeah, you
I
got to
remember
have
we did that in the Army because I was a paralegal, I was JAG, right? So you would have
right.
to do the legal assistance power of attorneys and wills when you're going through all the deployment package
Yep.
stuff and
You got to
yeah,
have your backup.
yeah,
Um, and then the third, and so in any event, if it's healthcare POA, it's your decision. You're the person deciding who's in charge. But if it's guardianship, it is the court deciding. And so what I see some of the time is the reason individual is languishing in the hospital where they don't need to be and where sleep is terrible and the food is lackluster is because their son and their daughter are fighting each other. So daughter wants to take mom home with her. Son wants to put mom in a care facility. The two of them are at each other's throats, and the court system doesn't know what to do. So now it's not just a simple decision. It winds
right.
up being, well, we have to get a continuance, and somebody has to hire an attorney, and it's a really nasty mess. And the person who suffers during that is the sick person. So especially if you think your kids are going to fight and act a fool, or if they already hate each other, you really need a healthcare power of attorney because
Yeah,
you don't want that because that will hurt you.
and you don't
Um,
want greed. Don't choose the one that's gonna be greedy.
No, you don't. And then the third scenario that I see, so I went through the demented, I went through the like physically disabled to the point where you
Right.
cannot make a decision. The third thing that I see is profound, and I want to emphasize profound mental illness. Like, I'm not talking about you're depressed. I'm talking about people who have been involuntarily committed to the VA every couple weeks. Like they just cannot stay out of the hospital.
Are
And
they
their behavior,
schizophrenic? Typically,
it
they're schizophrenic or
almost always they're schizophrenic. I
yeah.
do see the occasional bipolar with psychosis. And a lot of times, and I'm just being honest with you, Eva, some of the time I also see polysubstance abuse, but
Mm,
usually the polysubstance abuse is because the person is schizophrenic or bipolar with psychosis and they're trying to self medicate, but it's not working. I mean, I've had a veteran that was literally like naked on the VA's lawn at 2 o'clock in the morning when it was 20 degrees outside
mm,
because they were in a schizophrenic reality, but they were also high on methamphetamine. And so the court system is usually pretty good about working with you if you have a plan and you get discharged from the hospital with a mental health treatment plan. But for people who are like a revolving door, especially if you're doing things that are a danger to yourself or if you're doing things that are a danger to the community where you live, like I've seen
yeah.
one of these folks put his shoes, he went into a gas station and put his shoes on top of a hot dog burner because he was cold and he was just trying to warm up his shoes. But the hot dog burner caught the rubber on fire and almost burnt the gas station to the ground.
Oh
So,
no.
you can't do stuff like that. So, for people that are truly a danger to themselves or other people and they can't stay out of the hospital, then we have to look at being able to keep them on a consistent medication routine. And so, some
Yeah.
of the time that does require a guardianship. Now, for those folks, let's say, I mean, I've seen that happen to, an otherwise a physically healthy 25-year-old. So, for those guys, though, if they can get themselves under control, like if they can get their medication stabilized, they can stay on it for a really long time, they can show that they understand that they need it and stay
Mm,
on it, then you can get your competency restored. I mean, there is a legal process where you can do a competency restoration and you can get it back. But one of my favorite judicial officials that I've ever worked with told me one time, you only get that once. Right? Like,
mm.
we'll restore your competency once. But then if you go right back to being the same public disruption that you were before, and we think you're a danger to the population, if you lose it a second time, it's not coming back. So
Wow.
you really do have to be able to be, there are absolutely individuals who are not safe to be in society. And some of the time schizophrenics get assaulted by other people more than they hurt others. I've Some schizophrenics have some issues with their private parts being out in public, and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know where they are. But then somebody shoots them or assaults them because they think that they're trying to have an indecent exposure situation, which is really not what their intent was. But that's another
Yeah.
reason some folks
I
have to take your medicine. You've got
I
to
kind
take your
of laugh
medicine.
on that because my second husband was one of those. I had the kids in my car. We were headed to the hospital and they called me on my cell phone, of course, and said, "Miss Fulton, are you coming to visit anytime soon?" "Yes, I'm on the way." "Okay, well, that's a good thing because your husband," I mean, he was my ex at the time, "but your husband is streaking down the middle of the hospital hallway, and we need somebody to control."
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
okay, I'm on my way, I'll corral him, no problem.
And things like that are why guardianships exist.
Yeah, sad. It was sad. But I think there's a part of me that even as you were talking about that, how much is it also attributable to TBI or PTS that they they it's a fine line, and how do they manage that? And if there's also this extra segment of mental health disorder that either was present before but not ever diagnosed, and that's why
Right.
they were, that gung ho. Not that there people are mental who go sniper, ranger
Right.
or whatever, that green berets that they uh, but you've got to, there's that fine line with when you get out because of these compounding issues that it may have a lasting effect on you. And so
Absolutely.
the there was, what was the name of the movie? So Martin Sheen, and I think it was one of his sons. There was a movie that he made. He apparently had some drinking problems making the movie. I don't know if you ever saw that one or not, but I
I don't
watched a
remember that one.
documentary on it. So Martin Sheen, because I think it was Martin Sheen, or no, it was his son. What's not
Charlie
Emilio?
Sheen.
Charlie, uh, developed some issues with those movies, because they were so lived in that experience. You could only just imagine that here they are making a movie and coming out with some issues that
Right.
how do us as normal people who go in the military not come out the same
Right.
way?
I think the important message for all of that is understandable and quite frankly honorable for those of us who you've protected. But also, you need to get help. And there is help available. There's all kinds of treatments, and it's not always medication. Some of
Right.
the time, there's different forms of therapy that really can help you, but you have to seek that therapy out. You can't wind up, no one wants to see our men and women in the armed forces live a life that's not healthy and full because you're suffering. You know, we want you to be able to get help and get all the assistance that you need
Whoop.
to be able to provide you with.
All right, we got a couple of minutes. What's one question I should ask but didn't ask? Or do you have a closing thing you want to close out with? And we plug the book again.
I mean, I think I just want to say one more time that love is not burdensome. You're not being a burden for asking other people for help. And yeah, if you love my book or if you've enjoyed this conversation, my book is called Tumbleweeds by Paula Yost. It's available on Amazon.com.
Awesome. There you go. There's the website, folks. So, Amazon. You were such a pleasure. I think we could still have another conversation about this whole guardianship thing that is in the news with the VA right now. I have been watching it. And, I think it'll be interesting how it unfolds. I know the veteran service organizations, are picking up a stance on it as well. And after going through that experience with my second husband, it's tough. How d you know, because I was an ex, so I wouldn't have had that same stance of taking on that position other than being mother of his kids, you know. But if the family, his family was not involved with things either, that puts things in a very tough place. I can only imagine how that happens. And he was not a veteran, but how does that happen in the veteran sphere of things is something else too. So we'll keep watching. We'll keep having some dialogue on that if you don't mind.
Sounds good to me, Eva.
Yeah, thanks. All right, folks. Well, let's see. Thank you so much for joining us, Paula. Coming up on the show, Plus One Heroes is coming up next Saturday. They are a nonprofit that helps veterans. They have some veterans going through some different health challenges, and they're going to talk about their mission. It's wide open April 18th, folks. If you want to come on my show, feel free to reach out to me, Eva at nbradio.us. And Robert Odom is one of my bus buddies. That's what we call each other, bus buddies. I ride the commuter bus to DC, and he is a union rep with the Department of Treasury. But I'm not focusing so much on the Treasury side. We are talking about what those veteran benefits are. How do you leverage some of that, some of our veteran experience in working for the federal government? And how do you, work through USA Jobs on hiring and that side of things? And then, May on, I'm open again, still working through a couple of people who are trying to figure out what their schedules are, and look forward to having each of you on my show. So, hope everybody has a fantastic week. Tomorrow is Easter Sunday. Join me and Daryl on Monday for the Revivalist Radio Show, giving veterans a voice here on Military Broadcast Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.